I think we should say, just before we get the formal proceedings underway, to everyone who's on, that we're recording the proceedings so that we can show the event in future as part of the NMITE Summer of Discovery program, and so people can enjoy all the things that Paul's got to say and the discussions that we have and the questions that he takes in this event. So I hope that's acceptable to everyone. If it isn't, there'll be other events where we're not recording, and you can very welcome to join those. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to kick off, Jesse?
Yes, sure. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today in this conversation I'm having with Paul Stein. I can't tell you how delighted I am to welcome Paul to our Summer of Discovery. He is the Chief Technology Officer of Rolls Royce, and I don't think anyone needs any introduction to the astonishing work that Rolls Royce do, and the idea that they have engines in every continent on hundreds and hundreds of different aircraft just doesn't begin to capture the full extent of their technology interests and their technology achievements over the years, which include powering fighter aircraft, powering submarines, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So, Paul, thank you. As Chief Technology Officer, you are most welcome. Nothing could be more perfect from an NMITE standpoint than to kick this off with you. I know you've got a few slides, so let me just say thank you so much, and I hugely look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Jesse, and thank you for that great introduction, and hello to everyone at NMITE. And when I heard about NMITE and heard about it being set up, I thought it's absolutely brilliant. So I'm absolutely delighted to be helping in some small way by telling you about some of the things that are happening in the world, in Rolls-Royce, and maybe to get you to think a little bit about how you, as you further your careers, can contribute to this changing world. Now, if we could go to the first slide, or next slide, please. There. You know, there's a lot going on in the world right now. People use phrases like unprecedented. I'm sure some of our ancestors also used unprecedented, perhaps during the sort of shocking years of the 1930s that led to the Second World War. But really, it's hard to think of a period of so much turmoil in the world. And three of the big things that are happening in the world right now are, of course, COVID and the world's response to COVID. Both are very positive things that have been done. The incredible work that's been done rolling out the vaccination program, which has just been staggering. And by the way, the United Kingdom can stand tall in what it's done in standing up the vaccine task force. And we've been, I have to say, a lesson to other nations in how to make that work. Sadly, there's a lot of increase in threats happening across the world, and we've seen some belligerent nations, particularly Russia and China, flex their muscles in rather challenging ways for the world and for world security. We want to keep them as friends, but sometimes it's best keeping a friend from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness. But particularly, you would have seen in the newspapers, I'm sure, you know, China sort of claiming the South China Seas as its own territory and trying to deny access to those waters, with HMS Queen Elizabeth sailing down there right now as part of an international effort to declare these waters to be open seas. And then, of course, climate change, you know, and in some ways, you might say this is the biggest of them all. Sir David King, the government chief scientist, about 2 government chief scientists ago, once said that climate change was actually the most challenging thing that mankind has to face, far worse than terrorism, at a time when terrorists were wreaking havoc around the world. And at the time, he was ridiculed. Now, I don't think we ridicule him. We realize the enormity of climate change and those terrible floods taking place right now in Germany and Holland and Belgium, perhaps are a sad testimony to the impact of allowing our climate to be impacted by man-made greenhouse gases. So moving on, if we can move to the next chart. I'm obviously going to give you a Rolls-Royce centric view of this. Right, there we go. A Rolls-Royce centric view. And I thought about sort of 4 ways. There's only 3 of them here because I changed my mind after I wrote the slide, and this kind of thing happens, in which we as a company are helping play a part in this new world, in this new world order that's emerging after these shocks and trends that we've seen recently. And whilst these are going to be quite Rolls Royce centric issues, and the nature of asking me to give this presentation is I'll give you a Rolls Royce view on matters. Actually, what I'm saying really applies to many companies, many large companies, and hopefully will apply to you and inspiring you in your career moving forwards. But first of all, we've got to make air travel sustainable. I mean, you'll hear quite a lot about aviation and its impact on man-made CO2. Actually, numerically, it's not very great. It's about 2.6% of man-made CO2, but optically, the view is that wealthier people fly and they're polluting the environment. And so we've seen a sort of disproportionate spotlight put on making aviation sustainable, and quite rightly, I should say. So we're not shying away from that. We're making it happen. We've got a net zero plan. But one of the great things that's happening as a result of making aviation sustainable is an unforeseen benefit is emerging, and that's that we're finding new types of aeroplanes and new ways of connecting people. So actually, out of a crisis is coming innovation, which actually is quite good news. We're also looking to find new ways of decarbonizing the atmosphere, and I'll come on to that in a second, particularly Rolls-Royce using some of its technology in nuclear science to create fast-track ways to take fossil fuel burning power generation off the grid and replace it with net zero power generation. The fourth one that isn't on here, of course, is contributing to the defense of the free world. And it's got to be said that perhaps the UK has slipped back a little bit over the past few years in its contribution to global security and making sure we're all safe. And we're helping to sort of correct that balance, perhaps with some of the activities of belligerent nations being a wake-up call for us needing to accelerate that. So let me come on with some pretty pictures now and stop the words. So how do we make aviation sustainable? Well, if you want to look at the sort of pinnacle of today's technology, look no further than the great A350-1000. So this is a beautiful aeroplane. You see here flying at 45,000 feet. It is a all composite aircraft made by Airbus, which is a European company headquartered in Toulouse in France. And it's quite unusual in that it's only it and the Boeing 787 that are made entirely of composite materials. So up until then, aeroplanes were made out of aluminium, which is a good material, but is quite heavy. And it's only recently that we've had the, we've lost the picture. It's only recently that we've had the benefit of composite technology making us able to do an all composite aircraft. And you get all sorts of collateral benefits in being an all composite aircraft, one of which, by the way, is you can fly higher, because those airplanes that you travel in are pressurized, and the pressure of the cabin is trying to sort of burst the aeroplane apart. And that's one of the reasons why currently we only fly at about 35,000 feet with aluminium aircraft, unless they're sort of specially built. With composites, they're far stronger, and you can fly pretty much as high as the air will go. And 45,000 feet is 1/6 of an atmosphere. So there's not much air up there. So our engines have to work really hard to suck the air in. And underneath the wings, and you see one of them there, is the Rolls-Royce Trent XWB, which is our engine that powers the A350-1000. It uses so little fuel that that aeroplane can go from London to Sydney in one hop. So a 19-hour flight. Now that is quite an achievement for mankind, that we've now got a flying machine that can pretty much fly anywhere in the world in one hop. Unheard of many years ago, perhaps when Jesse and I were growing up. You got from London to Australia perhaps in 3 hops, 2 hops if you were really lucky. So that's where that technology has taken us. But if we move on to the next slide, we can't sit on our hands. And just because we're currently making the world's most fuel efficient engine in service, we have some competitors, notably General Electric in America, who are a very, very good competitor and a worthy number 2, we say. And so we have to keep the technology moving, and our next generation of technology we call ultrafan. So this is an engine to power the next generation of airliners, where we know we're going to have to be even more fuel efficient. And that's not just for CO2 reasons. It's also because I'm going to tell you a bit about sustainable fuels in a bit. They are going to be more expensive. And so you've got to be able to use less fuel, not just to save the planet, but to continue to make aviation affordable. Otherwise, the price of the fuel will be too high. Now, on this picture, all you can see is it's a huge engine. In fact, that man standing in front of the fan there is quite a tall individual. And in fact, it's about 2 people high inside that fan case, 140 inches. So it's completely huge. And if we go on to the next slide, I'm not going to go into the intimate detail on this chart because I will end up boring you all. So if we can move on to the next chart, please. Then this is the sort of insides of UltraFan. Now, please forgive me if I don't go into enormous detail, but broadly, the way we get the fuel efficiency is by having a huge, slower turning fan. So imagine a desk fan on your desk. If it's very small, it's very noisy and can't move much air. It's far better to have a big, slow turning fan. And the same principle is there at aeroplane level. And to get that fan turning slowly, we have to connect the core of the engine. So that's the bit that sort of turns the fuel into rotating force inside the engine. It's connected to the fan via a gearbox. And the challenges with this engine have been a lot to do with material science. So the fan itself is made of a composite material, which isn't just normal carbon fiber. It has to be woven along the stress lines of the blades for reasons. If someone wants to ask a question, I'll go into more detail on that. But it's the only way you can make the blades strong enough with an engine this big. And at the hot end of the engine, we used to just use metals. In fact, alloys of nickel are the only metal able to tolerate the huge temperatures at the back. We're talking 2000 Kelvin is the gas temperature coming out of the combustor. And now for the first time, we're starting to use ceramics. So these are brand new material systems with silicon carbide embedded in a matrix of silicon carbide. That provides us a lighter and higher temperature material. So if we move on, I mentioned that the sustainability of aviation isn't just about making aviation produce less CO2, it's also about creating new ways of air travel. And perhaps one example of this, which we're quite proud of, is a startup company in Bristol, not so far from you, certainly nearer than me in Derby. And it's called Vertical Aerospace. And Vertical have produced an eVTOL design. So eVTOL means electrical vertical takeoff and landing. And it's sort of halfway between a helicopter and a plane. And you can think of it as the next generation of helicopter. So it's a machine that you'll hear things like flying cars and things like that. Forget flying cars, just think about a new type of flying machine, which will take over from helicopters. And imagine this as an air ambulance, for example, able to land in city centers, like you see behind the picture there, that a helicopter can't do. All made possible through electrification. So through battery technology, through power electronics, through motors, down at now the price point and the weight where we can now use it for aviation. So if we move on to the next slide, a bit of fun that we're putting together as a company is Axel. This looks like an artist's impression, but it's a real aeroplane. It's currently at RAF Boscombe Down near Salisbury. And it's our sort of bit of inspiration. In the 1930s, Rolls Royce produced an engine called the Type R, which powered a super marine aircraft that went on to win the Schneider Trophy and kept the airspeed record for Britain in the 1930s. And that Type R engine then turned into the Merlin engine, which powered most of the British aircraft through the Second World War. Well, we're trying to sort of instill the same inspiration into the electric world. So this has been styled to look a little bit like the Supermarine SE6B, which won the Schneider Trophy, but now it's an all-electric aircraft. pure 3,000 batteries in there, the same cells as you use in a Tesla car, but we have to hammer those cells with 10 times the discharge rate that you'd use in a Tesla, even if you put your foot down. So every single cell has individually monitored for temperature, individually monitored to make sure it's in good shape, every one of those 3,000 cells. And so without an artificial intelligence system that monitors all the cells and make sure the aircraft is safe and there isn't a danger of battery fire, we wouldn't be able to do Accel. So that's due to break the airspeed record in August, which is currently set at about 250 miles an hour for all electric, and we're hoping to punch through 300. Moving on, where does electric flight take us next? Well, the next sort of size of aeroplane up is an aircraft such as this. This was our test bed, which we called EFAN-X. I won't tell you why it's called EFAN-X, but it's hybrid electric. So imagine the same principle as would be in a plug-in hybrid car like a Toyota Prius, but for the skies. And that gives you a much greater fuel efficiency, but now, rather than having a pure battery where you're limited on range, now your range is relatively unlimited. And this was a test bed we were due to fly, but the technology inside it, what we call the turbo electric generator and the power electronics, is all in Bristol and being tested as we speak, ready for the next aircraft that might come along in order to decarbonize what we're calling medium range transport. And there's a really important point here. People say, oh, with climate change, does that mean we're all going to fly less? Well, actually, it's total nonsense. We're all going to fly more. And the reason we're going to fly more is aircraft like this have lower carbon and noise footprints to connect city pairs together than road and rail. So there's going to be more air movement on the back of electric and hybrid electric, as well as restoring medium and long haul through sustainable fuels and those efficient engines. And interestingly, the launch customer for our pure electric aircraft is a Norwegian operator who wants to operate aircraft up and down the coast in Norway, where aviation connects city populations together far better than any other form of transport. I've driven around a field in Norway, and it can take you 2 hours to drive around the field to get just a few miles across the field, no longer necessary with electric flight. So that's sort of showing you how it's very easy to get into a mindset of thinking backwards rather than thinking forwards. Let's move on, and the next slide is just to say that all of this technology isn't just about decarbonisation and electric flight, it's also about helping our national security. And interestingly, and I can't go into too much detail, this is a project that the UK is launching with other nations now interested in participating because it's so exciting, and it's called Tempest. So you'll be aware the UK has a range of military aircraft based named after winds, and so our current combat jet flying is Typhoon. The next one will be Tempest, and the most important thing about Tempest, the biggest single difference actually is those engines are now generating not just thrust for the aircraft through those sort of pictures on the right there, but they're generating electricity in huge quantities, because the modern ways of warfare require just as much power in electricity as you need in thrust. And I'll say no more than that. I can say a little bit more if anyone's got any questions, but this is like a flying power station, and it's a remarkable piece of technology, which will take a few years to develop, but it gets Britain back in the game of being a world leader in combat aviation. Moving on, and I'm just sort of going to conclude on the aviation bit, and then I've just got one or two charts on other forms of power generation. So on aviation, how are we decarbonising aviation? So aviation currently consumes 365 million tonnes of what we call Jet A. So that's basically kerosene. So it's the same chemical formula to an approximation that we'll put in diesel in cars or in home heating or in agriculture. And we have to wean ourselves off of fossil-based kerosene between now and 2050 as part of the net zero journey. And we've got 3 pillars of aviation to do that. And we are working hard on them all. So one is we've just got to keep making those engines and airplanes more efficient. I've already said about that. The third one I've spoken about, which is for those shorter range flights, we can do something different. We can do electric, hybrid electric, or even hydrogen. But for the bulk of our aviation decarbonisation, we need sustainable aviation fuels. And this is perhaps where your generation is going to be thinking differently to the current generation, because to reach the 500 million tonnes a year we need by 2050, we're going to have complete new creative thinking in physics, in chemistry, in nuclear energy, in renewable energy, in order to create the pathways to getting from a sustainable feedstock into sustainable aviation fuels. And just to give a sense of scale, by the way, currently the world makes 80 million tons of what's called bioethanol. And bioethanol is the fuel that gets mixed in with cars. If you've got a car yourself, you might see E10 or E5 on the pump as you fill up your gasoline car, or D10 or D5 if you've got a diesel car. But for the gasoline cars, we mix in bioethanol in order to reduce the amount of fossils. E10 means 10%. And to fuel that 10% around the world needs 80 megatons, which the world currently produces. So it shows it can be done. If we move on, I'm going to change the subject completely with a couple of last slides. So we've talked about aviation decarbonisation, but actually what I've been talking about is 2.6% of man-made CO2. And yes, we're going to do it. We're on the journey. The UK government is firmly behind it, set up a council called the Jet Zero Council, which I'm honoured to sit on, which kind of convenes together all the politicians, industry and academia to make sure this happens. But now move on, if we could go to the next slide. Because to really drive down man-made CO2, we need to tackle the big consumers of carbon. And the big consumers of carbon are road transportation, the energy grid, and heating and ventilation in homes. And for those, we have to have nuclear power. Now, this is a truth that many people would prefer not to be a truth. They think you can carry on building windmills and solar and that will do it all. But the maths say you can't do that. You're going to run out of bulk grid scale energy storage capacity. Currently, wind in the UK, which is doing very well, and we're great supporters of wind, but it's cheating slightly because when the wind dies down, like today, we fire up gas-fired power stations to deal with the intermittency in wind. And basically, when we stop being able to fire up gas-fired power stations because we don't want to use fossil-based methane anymore, without either energy storage on a massive scale, so far that escapes mankind's ability to think of a way to do it, or with nuclear power, then we won't decarbonize the grid. And nuclear power is the one which we believe is going to be the solution. This is what's called a pressurized water reactor. There's various designs. Pressurized water reactors, Rolls Royce has made 30 of them. You probably don't know that because they power all of Her Majesty's submarines. But these are basically uranium-filled reactor cores that boil, sorry, they don't boil water, so they heat water under extreme pressure. They're quite safe because they're self-regulating, and then the heat from the reactor core gets transferred into steam in the steam generator, which drives the generator. And that's basically the principle behind most of the power stations you'll see around the UK today. In fact, the old power stations use a different principle, but I won't bore you with why that is. So this is called the pressurized water reactor. And if, for example, if you go to Sizewell in Suffolk or Hinkley Point, you'll see PWRs operating to help decarbonize our grid. But they've been quite expensive. And many of you will have seen in the news a lot of disagreements about nuclear power because of its cost, because the old big power stations are very costly things to make. So we've got our thinking caps on at Rolls Royce. And if we move on to the next slide, which I think is the last slide, we've taken a different approach to creating a pressurized water reactor. We call it the SMR, the small modular reactor. And the major difference is that all of the parts of the reactor are prefabricated. They're made in a factory environment. They are road transported to site and then erected on site. Rolls Royce isn't the only partner in this consortium. So we've got big civil engineering companies like Lang O'Rourke and BAM Nuttall that do all the civil engineering, which is amazingly innovative. It's not just the nuclear bit, which is our bit that's innovative, but the nuclear bit is innovative, and it's innovative because of this prefabricated design. So we're absolutely delighted that the UK government is pretty strongly behind this. It is really a very good solution for bulk decarbonisation of the grid and really moving the dial on net zero to an extent that it really will be a game changer, which we're hoping to export as well. So if we could end there, there's a last sort of thank you slide. Thank you for your forbearance. Thank you for listening. So I hope I've given you a bit of a tour de force around how Rolls Royce, and when I say Rolls Royce, we're quite a big company, and I speak really for our suppliers, I speak for our employees, I speak for our relationship with the UK government, I speak for the whole UK innovation ecosystem, really, when I say that there's a proud future ahead of us to help decarbonize aviation, open up a new world of electric flight and hybrid electric flight, and that all-important decarbonization of the grid, which is the big elephant of man-made CO2 we have today. So with that, I'll pass back to Jesse for any follow-ons.
Paul, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I absolutely, not just a tour de force, but a tour d'horizon. I mean, we went across the whole scope of the of Rolls Royce. Artificial intelligence, composite materials, nuclear, batteries. It's just, and the way in which these technologies are interplaying, it's extraordinarily interesting. Listen, I am a complete aeroplane nut, as you may know, and so it's extremely exciting to me when I take what I think is probably one of the greatest inventions ever created, which is the jet engine, which essentially has one moving part, and then to move that to an ultrafan system, it's just an extraordinary technical achievement. Yeah. I mean, I'm amazed by that. So thank you. And I love, of course, I love cutaway drawings as well. So that's marvelous. I suppose what I want to do, though, was to kind of pedal back a little bit and say, look, you're the chief technology officer, this extraordinary thing. You're supervising an amazing array of technologists and thinkers and, of course, practitioners and engineers. Can I just ask how you ended up here and what got you into engineering and what originally kind of excited you about it?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jesse, because my career path doesn't follow a traditional career path. And I would say, and if I can give advice to some of the students, some people can rise to the top of where they want to get. And by the way, the top of where you want to get to might not be Chief Technology Officer of Rolls Royce. You might want to do a really good job as a design engineer, and lots of people that we employ are very happy and doing that kind of thing and have extremely good kind of lifestyles, and that's what they choose to do. But my particular kind of thing, I suppose, was I have a short attention span, so I wanted to move around between various companies, and so my job has hopped really. In fact, I did electronic engineering 1,000 years ago, and I wasn't quite Faraday's apprentice, but some people claim I was. I started off in the mobile phone era, and then moved into defense electronics in the Cold War era, when such things were sort of incredibly exciting and very tense. I then went into business for a while and actually had to sell things to customers in the area of electronics, which really teaches you a lot when a customer doesn't care about things that you're passionate about. It teaches you technology itself doesn't sell, it's customer value that sells. I then ran a business, a research and technology business called Roke Manor, which was involved in defense and non-defense and mobile phones and that sort of thing. I then did something which many people found quite strange, which is I worked in government for 3 years. And I was the Director General for Science and Technology in the Ministry of Defence, so running all the defence science portfolio during the Afghan campaign, which was very exciting, and then joined Rolls Royce in 2010. So for me, the formula has been move around, don't get complacent, don't just feel that you're comfortable, you understand it, you're the expert. That can be what's called a fur-lined rut, and you can find yourself in a position where actually your outlook on the spectrum of how your technology impacts the world is quite limited. And as technologists, we have to understand it's about relationships, it's about working with government, it's about customers, it's about ecosystems, bringing together small, big companies, and it's about leading edge technology. But it's not just about one of those. So my advice would be, if you can, move yourself around and follow your interest, but don't get complacent.
Thank you for that. Very. I'm going to ask you for some more advice later. It's really good. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're enjoying this and you've got questions for Paul, please put them into the Q&A function. We've got a few already, but we'd love to have some more, and we'd love to know what you think of the questions that are in the hopper already. So do please join in. I'm going to push on a little bit though to give everyone a chance to get themselves organised. And let me just, if I may, Paul, just go to something that you raised really, I thought, very interestingly, which is just the question of how engineering itself has changed. Because my impression is, I mean, I'm not an engineer, always been kind of obsessed about it, but I'm not an engineer. And my impression is that it's become less and less siloized. I mean, in other words, you used to have technologies driving things, and now basically an awful lot of being a really good technologist is thinking, well, we need to pull a bit of this technology in, a bit of this technology, we want to pull them together and somehow create something extraordinary and new.
Yeah, no, well done, Jesse. As a non-engineer, that's a very good answer already. The two words that we use about engineering is it's now multidisciplinary and digitized. So multidisciplinary means that if I could take that Axel aircraft I showed you earlier, the airspeed record attempt aircraft, everyone working on that aircraft needs to understand everything about electrification, because batteries are quite dangerous things. And so for safety reasons, everyone has to fully understand, how those batteries are working or how they could fail. They obviously have to understand mechanics, fluid mechanics and stress engineering and blah, blah, blah for the airframe. They have to understand aerodynamics and they have to understand flight safety. So, and everyone on that team has to know all about those things. And there's almost nobody who's just, oh, I'm the expert who knows about the rubber for tires, There isn't such a job anymore. And even on big programs like UltraFan, you've got to know about the capabilities in other areas. So that's the multidisciplinary bit. Then the digitization bit is, certainly when I started my career in electronics, the first thing you did is got out a soldering iron and a printed circuit board and start making some electronic systems. And the first thing that my counterparts in mechanical engineering did would be starting to sort of cut metal and make prototypes. Well, those days are gone. We now talk about digital twins, and to go through the entire design cycle where everything we're doing is a digital representation of what we're about to make is where the technology is now lying. So we use 100,000 core computers for some of the, which by the way, take 2 weeks to run a simulation on a large engine. These are massive power hungry machines. But it means we don't have to make an engine. I'll give you a classic one. So there we are. Behind me is a very pretty picture, and that is called an FBO. It's a fan blade off experiment, and to show that the aircraft is safe, what we have to do is spin that fan. It's the fan from the Dreamliner engine up to 3,000 revs a minute, and then we explosively release a blade. And we have to show to the regulator that the blade is kept inside the engine and won't burst outside the engine and hazard the crew or the passengers. Now, we used to have to run 3 of those experiments, and they used to cost £18 million each because they destroy an engine. Now we use impact modeling, so the regulator still makes us do 1 for real, but all the others are done in a computer simulation. And the computer simulation, when that blade detaches, knows exactly how the blade is going to tumble, knows how the titanium is going to crush, it knows how the Kevlar case is going to expand. Absolutely amazing. And the fidelity of those things. So understanding where digitization takes you as an engineer is vital.
Okay, that's great. I love that. And of course, you have to explode 1 just in part to calibrate the simulations, I suppose.
Yes, you do. Eventually, perhaps not in my era, eventually we won't explode any. You know, in some areas of nuclear technology, we don't do prototypes anymore, amazingly. The models are so good, the first one you make is the first one you've ever designed.
Isn't that's extraordinary?
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, the questions are so good now. I'm going to start coming to some of the questions, if I may, Paul. So one question was about a technology that you haven't talked about, which is tidal technology. Yeah. Did Rolls Royce ever run the slide rule over tidal and ask itself whether it was a sufficiently interesting technology? Of course, I guess you're thinking about where we could add value as an organization.
Yeah, no. So, so first of all, there's a couple of different types of tidal. I don't want to get boring on it. I'm a fan of tidal, but it's got some challenges. I mean, basically, there's what's called free stream tidal, which is like a propeller under the water, which Rolls Royce invested in, which is better than wind because the tide is more predictable. So you know the tide's coming in or going out, so you can schedule electricity. And perhaps if you've got a process like a factory that's making something and needs a lot of energy to melt steel or something at a particular time of day, you can do a deal to sort of align the two. So actually, free stream tidal is good. And then there's tidal barrage. In fact, there was a proposal for the Severn to have a complete barrage across the entire Severn, because the energy on the Severn bore, that great wave coming in and out of the Severn, is enough to give the UK 6% of its electricity. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is this. The reliability of these things is really challenging because salt water eats metal, eats electronics, eats everything. And so what can appear as a great thing in the lab and can appear a great thing as a prototype, currently we're quite challenged, and we sold on our tidal business. They are really challenged to make these things reliable enough. And of course, if you have to keep, you know, if you've got 1% of them failing every day, it rapidly becomes an economic headwind that's just too great. So big reliability, and it's a good case study of where the theory and the practice moving in slightly different directions. A shame, because I think tidal's quite good.
I mean, it's very interesting you should say that. I remember when I was energy minister, we looked at the tidal lagoon project that was being put in.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think came through is actually it's much less continuous than people think. The suggestion is somehow everywhere in the UK there'll be some lagoon that's doing something. Actually, that's not true. The tides tend to rise and fall at the same time. So it's more intermittent than you might think.
And the tidal lagoon type things are kind of one-off projects. The way you're really going to get into bulk decarbonisation is the power of advanced manufacturing. And that's why SMR or wind energy, things that you can make in quantity, you know, I'm sorry to say this, sometimes there's some great ideas which are sort of almost one-off science projects rather than real bulk decarbonisation. You know, from Henry T. Ford onwards, we've learned that if you want to make complex things, and our own jet engines, 36,000 parts in each one of them, you stick to one formula and you bang, 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 and send them out. So we mustn't lose sight of the basic engineering principles. That engineering loves quantity and hates one-offs.
I can't help mentioning that so much of what you've said overlaps with some of the NMITE vision. We've got our own art college in Hereford, which is working a lot on design. There's a really interesting engagement there about design. This idea of integration, I think, is obviously fundamental. And then the other one I think is really interesting is the focus on advanced materials. And you've covered all that. Let's go to another question from Laura, which is, she says, look, it's great to see the aviation industry is innovating and reducing carbon emissions. What about all the embedded carbon that's in the industry and in the manufacturing process? Are there ways of, I mean, presumably in due course, you might be able to start swapping out hybrid engines for other engines, or we're going to have to wait for an entirely new generation of airliners, do you think?
No, I mean, so first of all, don't worry about the carbon in the carbon fiber aeroplanes, because you know that that won't end up in the atmosphere. Yeah, look, one of the important things that we always need to do as engineers, and we're better than scientists at doing this, is get the sense of proportion and scale. And if you have a look at one of our jet engines, and it's not quite the same for airplanes, but nearly true, we use 1,000 times the energy in use than you do in making it. So if you want to decarbonize the atmosphere, spend your money where it makes a massive difference. we've got a huge challenge in getting to net zero. And so chasing things that really don't make a difference, we just can't afford to do. That's not to say we're not decarbonising our factories. We're putting in microgrids, we're putting in solar and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of it, to be honest, is to show willing rather than actually to move the dial. So that A350-1000 aircraft, it's how much carbon does it use during its service life that dominates the CO2 footprint rather than the actual CO2 carbon embedded in the actual airframe itself. Having said all of that, I do know Airbus takes revert very seriously, as we do. I think 96% of our products now can be sort of melted down and used in the next product. But it's just, as engineers, let's all get focused on moving the dial on decarbonisation and make sure we get the data behind that.
That's interesting. Well, Laura's already responded, say great response. Paul, yeah. That's instant feedback.
Thank you, Laura.
So that's great. Thank you. So then let's go on to the other next question. Michelle, she says, just the CTO at Rolls Royce, what are your thoughts about what is supposed to call, what people call essential power skills alongside technical capabilities for the modern and the future workplace? I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but you may understand it better than me.
So I think I understand, but let me sort of answer and see if this works, and if it doesn't, please come back. We used to when I went to university, as I said, 1,000 years ago. Engineering was about a singular deep discipline, and we were taught as a singular deep discipline. And I could design you, a piece of electronics for a radar or something like that, and I'd be incredibly good at it. I wouldn't have a clue about the aircraft it went into or anything else. We now talk about the T-shaped engineer, and the T-shaped engineer is one where the bar across the top of the T means we now make sure that our people know a little about a lot of things and then a lot about a few things. And that's called the T-shape. It's sort of an accepted phrase in the industry, and it's one that you, as you go through your careers, I'm sure will hear. And so, one example that I think brings it home is in the news today, for example, is concerns about Newport Semiconductors and high bandgap semiconductors that actually are being worked on in Wales. And I was listening to the news item, a little bit frustrated, because clearly whoever read the news didn't understand the specifics of what our national problem is and where which part of the power distribution chain Newport Semiconductors is offering to. So as engineers, you mustn't be in that position, even if you're design engineers, even if you're looking at the interplay between design and art. My challenge to all of you is read about Newport Semiconductors, compare with what you hear in the news, and form your own judgment about what the real problem is, and you'll find yourself in a different place to some of the BBC articles. Not quite answering the question, but I'm just trying to encourage us all, stay curious. That's a phrase we use, stay curious.
Paul, thanks. Well, let me just come in behind that for a second, because the one I'm worried about is what you might call the flatline engineer, who doesn't develop any expertise in anything. It's just the infinite blagger about different things. We see that a certain amount in politics, as you may know. The other thing I think that you just worth following up on, though, is, of course, you might have said, in line with what you said, like 20 years ago, if you were the expert on rubber for tires, you were the go-to person for rubber and tires.
Yeah.
Now, just building on that, do we actually really need engineers who are more team-oriented? Because one of the kind of thought we've got here, which is you need engineers who are really kind of built as team workers from the very beginning, and therefore have some of those persuasive or communication skills that perhaps might have been missing 20 or 30 years ago.
I think you're bang on the mark, Jesse, and I think it's unless you can evangelize and talk about what you do. To an approximation, I mean, I'm talking to you today, absolutely delighted. It's the best fun part of the job, trying to help inspire the next generation. I also have to do less fun parts of the job. Sometimes the House of Commons Science and Technology Committee, which Jesse, you'll know what a horrible experience that is. You know, sometimes to our shareholders, our investors, sometimes to our board, sometimes to a team that isn't very, very motivated because they think, you know, they deserve some more computers or something like that. But unless you can communicate, unless you can get people to share your vision, share your position, then you're in a quite a more challenging position. Now, I do realise that you know, the internet, the use of social media, maybe even the use of Zoom is sort of changing the skills of communication. And we all have to understand that we influence things and people sometimes through not talking at all. It may be a LinkedIn chat feed that you put up, or it might be a Twitter feed. But I would put, you know, I would say if I could put a half course unit onto your great institution, it would be communications and letting people stand in front of, you know, just try it yourself at home. You know, put your iPhone onto record, and give a sort of 5-minute précis of what Jesse and I have talked about today, and then play yourself back, and you'll cringe, but you'll learn something, and you'll learn about how people hear what you say rather than necessarily what you meant to communicate. So if that's a good answer, I'll leave it at that.
We're going to take you up on that, Paul. Of course, one of the things that is interesting, and it's been built into the idea of NMITE from the beginning, is that you only ever work in groups or teams, and you only work on concrete problems. And I think that, so in a way, we're trying to distill some of that wisdom. And I think there's a worry sometimes, and I don't know whether you've seen this, but that what you often get out of university historically is fantastic experts in the theory of engineering who've actually not done very much engineering. I don't know whether that resonates with you at all. You probably find that when people come in, sometimes they actually have to be given a process of acclimatization where they actually get to the business of engineering things.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, I'll give you two answers. One, a slight sort of political point, because I've been working with Amanda Soloway actually on the culture behind R&D in the UK, and she's done a good job of pulling together something which I'm not sure is published yet, but I don't mind sort of just giving one snippet. But first of all, engineering is a team sport. It's a team sport. If you want to put a big sort of sign above NMITE, say engineering is a team sport, and hence learning how to play as a team. I'm not going to make football analogies, but you know what I mean. Well, the team did play well as a team, and in some ways, in their defeat, you could see them work as a team and support each other as a team. Well, engineering is the same thing. You know, we don't go for blame cultures. They're just not helpful. In safety issues, we get on the phone and talk to our competitors and say, hey, we've just seen a problem with X, watch it. It's a team sport, and think of it as a team sport. The broader issue, which I'll make a very brief version of, because to some students, perhaps early on in their career, they won't see this. One of the things we don't do well in the UK is move people between government, industry, and academia. We stovepipe people. And so what I would say to some of you and in your careers is break through those stovepipes. Government's a great place, by the way, to start your career. If you want to do that, some great programs, great training programs in various government departments. But if you stick in academia, you can get into a malaise of, first of all, being a bit of a single lone actor, and secondly, not understanding how difficult it is sometimes to take things you've done in the lab into things that make a difference to mankind. And similarly, people that stick in industry for too long sometimes can become themselves too sort of wrapped up, you know, thinking that no wisdom can come outside of their own organization. So if you can move around, I bet you your era will be one where moving around is encouraged far more.
Thanks, Paul. That's extremely interesting. Of course, one of the things that's striking is the extent to which Rolls has led in trying to lean into recruiting more women and more people with diverse backgrounds into engineering. It's still, I don't need to tell you, a bit of a scandal. Do you find, first of all, what do you find when you do that? And do you find that, in particular, young female engineers work in different ways to young male engineers, or other, as it were, are there other points of diversity that are worth picking up and of interest?
So diversity is very sort of dear to my soul. And in fact, now all of my mentees, make that go away, sorry. All of my mentees are now women. And interestingly, one of my mentees, I'll have to be obscure here because I can't give away who it is, but she is a young Muslim engineer, and she teaches me what it's like to enter a large engineering company as a young Muslim woman, and what it feels like. And oh boy, do I learn a lot, you know, absolutely incredible. So I sort of lap up everything she says. So so how do we sort of improve diversity in engineering? You know, at Rolls Royce, we are doing our bit. I'll give you a couple of examples. I had an engineering conference recently. I deliberately had all of the guest speakers were women to create role models for senior women in engineering. Anna Moscola, who's the president of Shell Aviation, and Fiona Murray, a good friend of mine, who is professor of innovation at MIT, and some others I won't go into. So create the role models. You know, we've got sort of active ways of ensuring that shortlists now are mandated to be multi-gender. We put women on the selection panel to make sure it's you know, that there isn't a sort of bias creeping in during the selection process. And we, I mean, every one of my technical assistants is always female, and I make sure they all sort of move onwards in their career, and I'm quite proud of where some of them have got to. But I don't want to sound complacent, because the fact of the matter is that for all of that, we're still in pretty poor shape. And with only 13%, I hear from the Royal Academy of Engineering, of engineers being women, that's just appalling. And there's something deeper going on in society, a deeper typecasting issue, which we can't solve in Rolls-Royce. We can help in the ways I've said, but somehow we need to have a real rethink about our whole cultural match of these fantastic careers in engineering versus what is exciting young women and from other diverse backgrounds as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's really interesting. Okay, couple of final questions before we wrap up, and we'll try, and we're not going to be wedded to midday particularly, but around there probably. So one question is, you were talking really interestingly, I mean, the whole thing's been fascinating, but just particularly a second ago about how you will get on the phone to competitors when there's a safety crisis to say, look, actually there's a problem, you don't think about it. And I just wonder whether or not engineering has played a role in your experience in opening up kind of wider issues of what you might call international cooperation or diplomacy. I mean, obviously an awful lot of those international areas that you've touched on are ones that are really only going to get solved by scientists, technologists, engineers working together. And I just wonder if there's a kind of science diplomacy of engineering that we should be exploring and thinking about. Yeah,
that's a really interesting thrust. I thought you were going to ask a slightly different question, and I'll be the politician this time, Jesse, and answer the other question briefly. But I will come back to your point, which I think is a really good one. You know, international cooperation in engineering is vital to address the really big challenges that mankind faces. You know, perhaps if I could just pick one example of ITER, which is the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor, which is being built in Cadarache in France, which will be the first sort of gigawatt scale fusion experiment. And it is a genuine, you know, it's got British engineers and French and Japanese and American, you know, it really is an international cooperative effort, simply because the size of the task makes it too big for any one nation to be able to afford. I could pick another example of scaling sustainable aviation fuels, where that's a distributed task. So it's not that the world needs one plant to make them all. The world just needs to cooperate and share on how a federated sort of group of plants that make these fuels in the quantities we need around the world all kind of have a competitive cooperation about them. So without thinking too deeply about your question, the end point seems really good. And the idea that people understand the challenges and benefits of international cooperation, and you'll know from your job in government, Jesse, these things are sometimes far easier said than done when you've got a couple of, global diplomats, each are kind of fiercely defensive of their own national position, and yet somehow you have to find a way of both winning out of the discussion. That's pretty hard. I'm sure many of you might be aware in the area of defence, we've done joint cooperations, for example, on the Eurofighter Typhoon with Germany, Italy, and Spain. Really, really, really hard to end up with something that is in the right place for everyone. So yeah, please do.
Now, of course, needless to say, we've now got everyone piling in on the Q&A, Paul. It's a classic moment. Okay. On the other hand, it's a reaction to constraint. It's like a piece of engineering.
Yeah.
So let's just, in a way, we've got three questions that drive to the same kinds of issues. So let's pick up what. So one is, we're building a group of engineers and academics at NMITE now. How do we set them up so that they can continue to take seriously what you're saying and what they're trying to do? How do they improve their own skills over time? And obviously, as you all know, we've tried to learn from Olin in the States and Quest in Canada, a whole bunch of international models for where you get the best pedagogy. Is there a particular place you would think we should go, or a style of thinking you think we should adopt?
Well, look, I think what you should do at NMITE is get as many outside perspectives as you can. You've kindly invited me to join in today, and I've been delighted that you've done so. And thanks for the great questions as well. But invite others in as well, and not just British people as well. People that have been successful. And here's a trick. Don't just necessarily invite, successful people that have risen to the top of their organizations, like CTOs of Rolls Royce, or I'm not in the same breath as Richard Branson, but you know what I mean. You also need to invite in some people that have actually, maybe some women engineers that are actually very happy with their career, even though it's not necessarily taken the same direction, and they become great in their own fields. Or maybe engineers who have wanted to be a project director of a big engine program or a car, if it's Jaguar Land Rover. So I think what we need to do at NMITE is realize that life is a multi-dimensional thing, and the way that you are going to get pleasure out of your career is not by slavishly following someone else's formula. It's arriving at your own philosophy of life. What is it that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning? One of the things that I recoil with horror is, and I advise your students to do the same, somebody that says to you, I think you should do that job because it'll be a good career move for you. And my answer to that every time is forget it. Because, every job you do, you've got to feel you're giving your best, you're enjoying, you're able to contribute. And if you're doing it as part of some grand career move, walk away. That's not the way you're going to give your best. So I would say it's two things. Think about what you want to do when you get out of bed in the morning and what excites you, which, I was having a chat with my daughter who's just graduated in chemistry from Bath. And I was quite shocked that actually she didn't actually think about life in that way. What do you want to do? Instead, life to her was a prescriptive formula of what the careers advisor had told her was a good thing. Well, that's not what life's about. And then I would say bring in other role models, but don't just choose people that have risen to the top. So this is now getting a bit deep. I'll say one more thing. I was at my happiest, truthfully, probably in about my third job, where I was leading a project which was an early cellular phone system. I couldn't wait to get into work every day. I was, reasonably well paid. I worked for Philips, had a small team working for me, and we were kind of breaking the barriers, all the problems with early mobile phone kind of design. And, you know, I think back sometimes and think, did I actually, just for happiness of where my life has gone, did I do the right thing by sort of getting ambitious and moving upwards? But it's a question that, you know, you students need to ask yourself.
Paul, what a wonderful way to end. And you've very brilliantly, I mean, encapsulated and touched on a whole series of other questions that we've got in the sidebar in one answer about how young people can get motivated and get excited and get enthused about engineering and about what drives one through the life, one's own life and one's own career choices. All I can tell you is that anyone watching this on YouTube, you know, 3 months, 50 years hence is going to be excited and enthused, and it's going to feel your joy and your energy. And so we thank you so much. We couldn't be more grateful to you. And thank you so much for spending the time and joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Jesse and Bev, and thanks to most of all to all the NMITE students for listening. Thank you.